Welcome to Are You Ready? With your Bible close from. What's happening in the world? Let's look at the Bible.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Are You Ready? We have a very special guest tonight, and he's back with us. We're very happy to have him once again. In a moment, we'll introduce our guest. I want to welcome all of you. If you're watching Are You Ready for the first time, wherever you may be around the world, please click subscribe, click notification, and please share this video. There is going to be a lot of great, very important information. Please pay attention. Ask God to speak to you as you hear what Dr. Pry is going to share tonight. It is going to be extremely important what he is about to talk about. And again, we're very happy to have him with us. He's been with us a few times before, and we're glad he's back. Dr. Peter Vincent Pry, and he's been with has been with the EMP Commission. And before we get into the questions, and we got plenty of them, a lot to talk about tonight, I would like Dr. Pry to introduce himself once again, because there may be some people within our program, Are You Ready, that may not recognize Dr. Pry. And so once again, Dr. Pry, thank you once again to be on Are You Ready? Can you let people know who you are and your experience?
Sure. I've worked in the field of nuclear strategy and weapons of mass destruction all my professional career. First at the CIA, where I was their senior analyst on Soviet and then Russian nuclear weapons and strategy, and their top expert on electromagnetic pulse attack and EMP weapons. Then I served on the House Armed Services Committee professional staff, surveying the 60 members of that committee, which is the most important committee in Congress. It writes the defense budget. You know, as a expert on nuclear weapons strategy, NATO enlargement, terrorism. Then I served on several congressional commissions, director of the U.S. Nuclear Strategy Forum, the Commission on the Strategic Posture of the United States, and I was chief of staff of the Congressional EMP Commission for 17 years. Mm-hmm. And now I run the successor to the EMP Commission, the EMP Task Force on National and Homeland Security, which is a unfunded congressional advisory board. It's not nearly as important as the EMP Commission was, but it's like going from an aircraft carrier to a torpedo patrol boat. But as long as we can fire one torpedo or fire off one gun, we are going to keep fighting to try to protect America from EMP and cyber warfare and nuclear attack.
Okay, well, thank you. I mean, you have plenty of experience. For those who are going to be watching, once again, if you're watching Are You Ready? Please subscribe and share this very important information we're going to share with you tonight here. Before we get started, we're going to talk about Iran. We're going to talk about North Korea, and we're going to talk about you have an article that's called Blackout
Warfare.
What Blackout Warfare? But before we get to that, I want you to see what you think, because recently as you know, the Russians have been near Hawaii. I don't know if you kept up with that.
I wonder if we could start off with Iran. Okay.
You want to start with Iran?
Yeah,
Yes.
because you must have ESP. I almost stopped you to say that I wanted to talk about Iran. If anything else to sort of get it off my mind, because I had a meeting with just this afternoon. I met with a prominent U.S. senator, good man. I'm not going to mention his name because what I'm going to say may come off as a criticism, and I don't want it misconstrued. All right, but this person is presidential timber. I respect him that much. But I was shocked, frankly. We were talking about Iran. That this person, this senator, this very intelligent, one of the best informed members of Congress, has swallowed hook, line, and sinker, the Obama and intelligence community view that Iran does not have nuclear weapons yet. Okay. And I'm surprised he wasn't aware of the fact that, yeah, that's the mainstream Washington view. But people like me and other people that are a lot more important than me have a very different view of that. And we've published articles. We've got a chapter in a book about the fact that we think Iran already has the bomb and is probably a nuclear missile state. And frankly, it's pretty overwhelming when you think about it. This senator expressed the view that he was criticizing the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action that the Biden administration wants to bring back, and his view was that the Iranians are cheating. They cheated on the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action. They're going to continue to cheat on it, and he said in 4 years they might end up with the bomb. Okay, here are some of the basic facts. And I'm going to send him these facts again tomorrow. But Jim Woolsey, who was the former CIA director,
correct.
Rich Ehrmarth, who was the chairman of the National Intelligence Council under Ronald Reagan, Dr. William Graham, who was President Reagan's science advisor and ran NASA and is the free world's foremost expert on EMP. Ambassador Henry Cooper, who was the director of the Strategic Defense Initiative for the Bush administration and is also an expert on EMP. All these guys are top experts, on nuclear weapons design, nuclear strategy, and missile technology. And all of us agree, and we have co-authored, several articles warning that Iran probably already has the bomb. And the reason we think the evidence is pretty overwhelming that they have the bomb, is because prior to 2003, Iran had already developed implosion devices and had tested successfully implosion devices. That's the heart of a nuclear weapon. An implosion device is it's a very hard to make. It's a chemical lens that's designed to make a shock wave that goes inward, not outward, to compress the uranium or plutonium sphere uniformly into a critical mass, which is how you get a nuclear explosion. And to make that, you need to make bridge wire detonators. You also shoot neutrons into the mass to help the fission reaction along.
Right.
The Iranians had all that. They successfully and were actually manufacturing all these things prior to 2003. We also know from the International Atomic Energy Agency, which is one of the world's worst watchdogs, that even a blind hog will turn up an acorn now and then. And the IAEA turned up the plans that the Iranians were working on before 2003. They had more than a dozen different designs for an atomic bomb that could fit inside the high explosive reentry vehicle or their Shahab-3 medium-range ballistic missile. That at the time was their most sophisticated ballistic missile. The high explosive warhead, okay, which carries high explosives normally.
Right.
What they had to do was empty out the high explosives and put an atomic bomb in there. And they had to change the design about a experimented, changing design around about a dozen different ways, more than a dozen different ways to fit it in that reentry vehicle. Now, it's a lot harder to monkey around with the design of an atomic bomb than it is to change the shape of a reentry vehicle. You know, it's easy to change the shape of a reentry vehicle. Why would they do that? Clearly, they didn't want us to know that they had a bomb on a missile. You know, that's the only reason they would do something like that. So this was all the prima facie evidence that led us to conclude and warning that the Iranians have probably got the bomb, you know, since before 2003, and have probably been clandestinely developing the bomb. All this business about inspections from the International Atomic Energy Agency, you know, there are two nuclear programs in Iran. One is the overt civilian program. That's what the IAEA gets to inspect, okay? We don't know what the military is doing in these underground facilities, but we do know from various other information, some of which the IAEA managed to recover, that there was a military program too. And no IAEA inspector has ever been allowed at any of these military bases or into any of these underground facilities. And people will say, well, where would they get the enriched uranium and enriched plutonium for this clandestine atomic bomb? Well, you could have centrifuges operating underground. You know, there's actually a photo imagery of these high voltage power lines, you know, that cross hundreds of kilometers of desert, okay? And then they go underground. They just end underground in this vast underground bunker out in the middle of the Iraqi desert. You know, they're doing something underground that requires huge quantities of electricity. And there aren't that many things you could do in an atomic bomb program, like running thousands of uranium centrifuges, you know, is one very likely explanation for it. We've had defector testimony, you know, that they have the bomb. Reza Khalili, who was the only CIA operative who ever successfully penetrated the scientific wing of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard, which is in charge of the atomic bomb program, you know, has publicly said that they had the bomb, you know, and that there was evidence, you know, that might even, at one point during the Obama administration, he had an offer from insiders, you know, who were hostile to the regime, who offered if they could be paid $20,000 to get photographs of the Iranian atomic bombs, okay? And the Obama administration, CIA, didn't want to come up with the money to do that. You know, I don't think they wanted to know. I think they wanted to go forward with this Iranian deal. Now, so we've all this evidence. I mean, how can you be basically in the Manhattan Project, the project we had when we first invented atomic bombs, when nobody even knew if it was possible to build the bomb. It started off as a gleam in Albert Einstein's eye, a light bulb over his head, and then we had a project, and it took us only 3 years using 1940s era technology and not having any idea about how to build an atomic bomb when we first started off. It took us only 3 years to come up with 2 atomic bombs, a completely different design, a plutonium implosion device and a uranium gun device, okay? That's what we did. So basically, Iran, we know prior to 2003, the stage they were at, if you look at where we were in the Manhattan Project, you know, when we were making implosion devices successfully, and bridge wire detonators and neutron initiators, we were just months from the bomb. You know, for all practical purposes, we had invented the bomb when you invented that technology. So we're expected to believe that Iran got all the way, you know, 99% of the way to the bomb prior to 2003, and then they stopped and didn't complete the project. You know, we don't believe that. We think that strains credulity, and that they have that they don't want the world to know about their atomic bomb. People will also say, well, why didn't they test the bomb? Well, maybe it has been tested in North Korea. And another fact is that you don't actually have to test an atomic bomb. You know, we understand the technology well enough, you know, so that it can be, you can build the bomb and not test it and have high confidence it will work. And we know that is so because the first atomic bomb ever built was the Hiroshima bomb, and it was not tested. Hiroshima was a test. You know, the scientists with this brand new theoretical device had high confidence that it would work, and they were right. The implosion device was tested only once. You know, that would turn out to be the Nagasaki bomb. Tested it only once before they actually used it. And the Iranians had the benefit of all of our scientific work. You know, the Manhattan Project notes were declassified. All kinds of information has been declassified about how you make atomic bombs, how you make hydrogen bombs. In fact, you know, during the Carter administration, there was a magazine, I think it's still around, a left-wing magazine called The Progressive. And they wanted to publish an article called The H-Bomb Secret, because they had found out, you know, a lot of the secrets about how you build an H-bomb. And they wanted to publish it, unclassified. And the Carter administration, you know, not a hawkish conservative administration, but they were desperate to stop the publication of this article. And it went all the way up to the Supreme Court, but the Supreme Court ruled against the Carter administration. And so, you know, there's unclassified information right in American magazines about how to build hydrogen bombs. So there's plenty of information out there. You know, I really don't understand why conservatives and Republicans, you know, don't challenge this intelligence community assessment that Iran doesn't have the bomb yet. Even their own assertions are kind of ridiculous when you look at the history of it. You know, the intelligence community has been saying for nearly a decade that Iran is within 6 months to 1 year from getting the bomb. We've been saying that for almost a decade. Okay, you know, and the last data point. You know, Israel successfully stole a big chunk of Iran's nuclear archives. And in those nuclear archives, there's a fact that we didn't know about. All right? But according to the nuclear archives, prior to 2003, the objective of the Iranian nuclear weapons program was to build 5 atomic bombs before 2003. It was called the Ahmad Project. And that was their specified goal, 5 atomic bombs before 2003. I mean, I think that is additional compelling evidence that we're right, you know, even though there's not many of us, okay? And all the Washington establishment is wrong about this, about where we are with the nuclear threat from Iran. And
I want to ask you, would you say, it seems to me, and I totally agree with you, I believe that Iran already has, I've thought that for a long time, that they already have a nuclear, if not 1 or 2 or 3 nuclear bombs already. I think that the whole, you know, the whole JCPOA it's all been like a smokescreen. People don't want to face the facts, as you have been stating. People know that they do, and they don't want to deal with the situation. Would you agree that the whole JCPOA has been something that hiding the truth and just covering it up and saying that they don't have any?
I hoped that was the case. I hoped that was the case. And I thought that was true because, you know, the Obama administration, in making all these enormous concessions to Iran, admitted that they had the bomb, you know, and they didn't want the responsibility of having Iran go overtly nuclear on their watch, and then they would get the political blame for it.
Right.
It's hard to understand otherwise why they would give $100 billion, you know, to Iran, why they would cut ties with Israel and Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates, basically, and alienate our closest allies, including the moderate Arab states, you know, and always whatever Iran wanted, Iran got out of the Obama administration, as long as they would be willing to sign this JCPOA, sign on to this lousy deal. So they acted, you know, the only rational explanation I had back in the Obama years, you know, was that, well, you know, there's a theory, I didn't know this, but I suspected just as you do, that that Iran had the bomb. They wanted to, the Obama administration wanted to cover that up, and they wanted Iran to go nuclear on somebody else's watch, so they wouldn't suffer the political damage from it.
Correct.
And also, they probably, being big liberals and leftists, probably sincerely believe that America's presence in the Middle East was a provocation to poor Iran, and that if only we would show them that we were sorry and that we were willing to take penance by giving them billions of dollars and tolerating their terrorism, against our allies and even against our own troops, that they would see that they don't need the bomb, and they could become a normal state. It's called convergence in arms control theory.
Correct.
Their values and our values would come together, and we have a come by a and cease to be enemies, and that was their big idea. And that's what I thought. But I'll tell you, I know this senator, very smart guy. He's got access to the classified information. He doesn't appear to know that, okay? And so our intelligence community is also, but I don't know that our intelligence community is smart enough to figure it out. What I think now is that our intelligence community is just wrong, and that they have misinformed both Republicans and Democrats. And we've seen this film before, okay? Because they were wrong about North Korea, really big way. Right up until the spring of 2017, the intelligence community was telling us, oh, even though North Korea has tested some atomic weapons, don't worry about them yet. They don't have an ICBM that can reach the United States.
Oh, boy.
At least 10 years away from getting a hydrogen bomb, and they don't have a reentry vehicle. That's still an argument there. They haven't developed a reentry vehicle that can penetrate the atmosphere and have that weapon land on a city and blow up a city. That was in the spring of 2017, just months after they made that assessment. Iran demonstrated an ICBM that could reach anywhere in the United States. And then at the end of the summer, they tested a hydrogen bomb. And they've actually also tested reentry vehicles, demonstrating that they have all these things. Not that you need to test it, because if you just look at the photographs, of Iranian missiles during the military parades, they all have reentry vehicles. That's not a hard thing to make, that's very, you could do that with a slide rule. A good engineer with a slide rule could figure out how to make a reentry vehicle. You know what the reentry velocity is. You know what the temperatures are going to be. You know what the shocks are going to be. So you know how to design the thing so it can survive the heat and the impact and all the rest. That's not hard, so they were dead wrong about the North Korea. In fact, just months before North Korea proved them wrong, and indeed, I remember. I believe that on one of their missiles, one of the ICBMs they tested was on the 4th of July, demonstrating that they could reach any country in any part of the United States. And I believe a week before that missile launch, they put out another national intelligence estimate, an open source national intelligence estimate that anybody can read, that said, well, we think they're a decade away from having an ICBM, that could reach the United. 1 week before they actually tested such a missile. And then they had I think it was a world record, that they had to withdraw a national intelligence estimate. It was only 1 week old, and it was wrong. So that's how bad they are. And so now I believe, I think that if the intelligence community knew, maybe they wouldn't tell this particular senator, because he's a conservative and a Republican, and the intelligence community is, it's the Obama intelligence community still. I mean, all these people are rabidly ideological now and left wing. So if they did know the truth, they might not tell it to Republican senators and conservatives, But I don't think they're just incompetent and stupid, and they probably really think that Iran doesn't have the bomb. Anyway, our public policy is all based on that. And it's just so shocked today that this really smart senator, who I really respect, and I hope he can be president of the United States someday, that even he didn't know that, that there's a very credible alternative view out there, about the Iranian bomb. Oh, another aspect of this business about Iran. I was in Israel, and I talked to some of their top intelligence people. And when we talked in private, because Israel's official position, when Netanyahu briefed Congress, Israel's official position is that, well, Iran doesn't have the bomb yet, but they're really close, that they could get a bomb in 6 months. to a year. They basically have the same position as our intelligence community. And Israel has been saying for the past 10 years that they're within 6 months to a year from getting the bomb. And when I talk to the Israeli spies over there, and analysts over there, and when we talk in confidence, so I'm not breaking. Well, I guess I'm breaking that confidence here on television. But after all, the fate of the world could be at stake. But they agreed with me, and they said, we have independently arrived at that assessment too. That's our private view. That's our private view that Iran probably already has the bomb and can deliver them by missiles. Okay, but we're so dependent. We, Israel, we are so dependent on our friendship with the United States. Mm-hmm. We don't want to openly contradict what your intelligence community says. So we basically say the same thing that your intelligence community says, because we don't want these guys to get angry at us and have an open break between the United States and Israel on the
Iranian
of where Iran is with its nuclear weapons program. America's Israel's only friend. All the European states are pretty hostile to Israel. Mm-hmm. Varying degrees, but all of them would likely point a finger at Israel. The ability to engage in self-deception and fantasies, about the Iranian nuclear threat is even greater in Europe among our NATO allies, because they don't want to face reality either, okay, than it is here in the United States. And so they would be more likely if Israel were to come out and say, Iran probably already has
the nuclear bomb.
Oh, those Israelis, they're warmongers. They're trying to push us into a war with Iran. Don't listen to them. And it would cause a breach. So that's why, at least that's what I was told in my conversations with Israeli intelligence officials about why privately they agree with our assessment. But publicly they can't go up against the CIA and the DIA and the State Department, because they don't want to risk a breach with with the U.S. intelligence community and the U.S. government.
Regarding Iran,
sorry.
But I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No. Thank you for letting me hold forth on that, because I, call this a therapeutic exercise. Came back from Washington just so concerned and disturbed about this conversation, the way it went. That after all the, it's not like there hasn't been a lot of us putting out articles and making this work. I'm just surprised that this particularly usually very well-informed member of the Senate, thinks exactly the way the Obama administration does about the Iranian nuclear threat, and thinks the same way as our incompetent intelligence community. He was one of the guys that I thought would know the truth. But anyway, go ahead. We can go on.
It seems to me like you just said, everybody's trying to look the other way, doesn't want to face the facts. Now, we're talking about Iran, and I'm sure if they have and I believe they do have nuclear bombs, that they do have an EMP capability. And if they do, I don't know if you recently heard about the 2 Iranian warships that went around the Cape of Hope and came out. They were in the Atlantic. I don't know if you heard about them. And so when I heard about that, they say all they have is they have some battle, crude little boats that they can chase people on the water. They don't really have anything else on there. I mean, how can they be so sure? Couldn't it possible? This is a hypothetical. I mean, this is for the first time. Iranian ships have never been in the Atlantic, as far as I know. And there they are, 2 warships in the Atlantic. Could they possibly have something on the ship that they could fire and maybe do an EMP? What would you say?
I think the ships are a distraction. The warships are a distraction.
Okay.
because we know the Iranians have a missile system that would be able to make an EMP attack against the United States using a freighter. Okay, it's called the Club K, and they got it from Russia. Russia actually designed this thing to give the United States trouble with countries all over the world, that are rogue states like Iran. The Club K is basically a combination cruise and ballistic missile that the launcher looks exactly like a shipping container. So you can put it on a freighter, and it'll look like it's just a freighter, a normal freighter. And the missile fires off of out of the shipping container, and it travels at supersonic speed, just a couple meters above the ocean. So it flies under radar. Okay, and then when it gets about 100 miles from target, there's a solid rocket booster for the last part of its phase, so it can come in at really top supersonic speeds, to deliver a nuclear or conventional warhead, okay, for an explosion against whatever the target is, or that missile could go straight up, and it could get to an altitude of about 80 kilometers, which is a great altitude for doing an EMP attack if you wanted to do it that way. So I wouldn't use an Iranian official Navy vessel, because all of our intelligence assets are going to be focused on that.
Okay.
I would, if I were going to make an attack on the United States, and if I were Iran, the main attack would come from some freighter that isn't even under an Iranian flag. I'd be flying some Ecuadorian flag or Ghana or some third world country that's willing to sell you, the rights to fly their flag and to do shipping under their name. And I would send my Navy ships out to the Atlantic so that our intelligence resources would be distracted and focused on that. But the real hit is going to come from one or more freighters off our shores, and that's the scenario, that one of the scenarios the EMP Commission was most concerned about. But now we know when we were developing those scenarios, Iran did not yet have the ability to launch a satellite, okay, that could orbit over the United States, and now they do. January of last year, they demonstrated the capability, to put a satellite in orbit. In fact, the satellite did pass over the United States. Now, it wasn't a semi-permanent satellite like the North Korean satellites that are constantly orbiting over us. It was a temporary satellite, but its first orbit, it had several orbits and then fell into the ocean. But the first orbit went right over the United States, on a south to north trajectory, which, as we've talked about this before, that's a good trajectory for doing a surprise EMP attack, because it impedes our ballistic missile early warning radars and our interceptors, which are oriented toward the north. So it basically comes up behind them. We're blind and defenseless from the south, and it passed right over the center of the country. Again, an optimum kind of an orbit. And this satellite, I think they were clever about it, because the satellite that they announced that they actually orbited, it was very small, too small to carry a nuclear weapon. It was only like 50 pounds, all right? And most of the press focused on that and kind of laughed at, oh, look at that, the Iranians orbited a 50-pound satellite. But what they ignored, and I wrote an article about this, is that the third stage, which weighed 1,000 pounds, was also in orbit, okay? So, that demonstrated the ability to put a nuclear weapon into orbit. It doesn't matter the part that you declare a satellite, and then you just say, well, they ignore that third stage that's also orbiting. What matters is the net weight that you can put into orbit. They demonstrated the capability to put more than 1,000 pounds into orbit, and that's more than enough, much more than enough. A super EMP warhead might weigh 100 pounds or less than 100 pounds. So they have the ability to hit us anonymously by ship or anonymously by satellite.
So on this program, we can definitely say that I believe that the Iranians already do have nuclear weapons, and this whole thing that the Biden administration is trying to do to revive the JCPOA it's just a continuation of the same thing, and we don't want to face the facts. Correct?
Yeah, yes, but it's a willful blindness, not just by the Democrats and by the Biden administration, but by the Republicans, including good Republicans who, I guess, they hear from the intelligence community all the time, and senators and congressmen are usually so busy they don't have time to read reports themselves, and they have staff that provide them with the information, and I think that there's this reflexive thing, especially among young staffers. Oh, the CIA told me this. I got a CIA briefing, or a Defense Intelligence Agency briefing, or the Director of National Intelligence, the Office of the Director of National Intelligence briefing. Most people who have never served in the intelligence community have a reflexive degree of respect, for the intelligence community, basically from the movies and from the myths and fantasies we have about the intelligence community. Oh, they have satellites that can read a nice license plate. Everybody who works in the intelligence community is like these heroes, like that television show 24. They will die for the country. They love their country more than the average American in the street. There's no politics in the intelligence community. They're above politics, and they're the ultimate patriots. And so that sort of, from our culture, inculcated into so many Americans, and people just say, they give 10 times as much weight, to what the intelligence community says versus some independent analyst, like me or like Dr. Graham, even though the guy is, a super genius and has served as the White House science advisor, or Fritz Ermarth, who was chairman of the National Intelligence Council, former CIA directors, well, they're not in the intelligence community anymore. So now that, or me, I'm not in the CIA anymore. So I must have lost those virtues that are associated with, with being in the intelligence community. Although I hope that intelligent people who have been following what's been happening in this country are starting to get a little more skeptical about what a bunch of heroes they are. I mean, let's not forget, that this intelligence community is so politically biased and to the left, that they tried to hang President Trump on false charges of being a Russian agent, basically conspired in a coup d'etat against him, and they are in love with the far left of the Democrat Party, so much so that they've been caught red-handed cooking the books to support foreign policies of the Obama administration and probably now the Biden administration. How can you trust their intelligence assessments? They're going to say whatever Biden wants them to say, just the way they said what Obama wanted them to say. And that's why one of the reasons, not the only reason, why they're so bad at their jobs and they screwed up on North Korea. How can we trust them on Iran after they screwed up on North Korea? And North Korea wasn't even trying to hide its nuclear program for us.
No, they didn't.
Nuclear weapons out in the open. It was so launching ballistic missiles out in the open. We were able to go out and fish up expended boosters from their intercontinental ballistic missiles, examine them. So we should have known, the level of advancement from sound technical analysis. I can only conclude that they didn't want to face the reality, even with the booster staring them in the face, that they were going to be able to reach the United States with boosters like that, because it didn't fit in to the narrative that the Obama administration wanted to sell everybody about North Korea. And but Iran is just the opposite of North Korea in their approach. They tried to hide everything. They denied they have an atomic weapons program, unlike North Korea. And yet if you're a half intelligent person, you've got to know that they actually have one. They have a military textbook, even that is taught to the senior officers that admires the Soviet Union for cheating on various arms control treatment and describes in some detail the measures that the Soviet Union went through to cheat on arms control treaties. I mean, what does that tell you about what likely our Iranian behavior is going to be? But I also have to say there's another systemic factor. The ideological bias is probably the worst part of it. But there is another factor where I think the intelligence community is always going to be behind the eight ball and less trustworthy than highly competent, independent people. And that is because of the phenomena of corporate thinking, groupthink that exists within the intelligence community. They don't, and I know this, I mean, I have first-hand experience, and I'm not saying that I'm the brilliant analyst, okay? But let's suppose you had a brilliant analyst working for the CIA, person who was really very good. That person doesn't get to say in agency reports what he thinks, okay? Because you've got to negotiate and with other analysts in this, the whole body, the corporation has to agree with the assessment. So it runs past many people, okay? The theory is supposed to result in a better product, but common sense will tell you that it will always produce mediocrity, because in any organization, you're going to have a small number of really good people, and then a lot of people that are in the middle in terms of their competency, and then you're going to have a number of people who are really incompetent, okay? Maybe a lot more incompetent people than smart people. And when you add these views all together, and divide them by the common denominator, you don't come out over here on the brilliant side. You come out someplace in the middle. Maybe even this way if you've got more stupid people than really smart people. And that's why the intelligence community is so often wrong, about its intelligence assessments, because it's where brilliant people go to not be heard. You end up having to have your point of view watered down with mediocrities, and a lot of these people aren't even experts. The people over you, the so-called managers, they want to get promoted. They're in that place so that they can get promoted in the intelligence community, and so their eye is always on, well, what does the administration think? Is this going to anger the people around the president, or is it going to make points with the people around the president? Because I don't get promoted pissing off the president of the United States. I get promoted by providing intelligence that helps them. That's how they think, and that's why we are where we are with these terrible intelligence assessments.
So if we could switch now, we talked about Iran. We definitely agree they have the nuclear bomb. And if they wanted to, they do have the capability of having it reach the United States at this time. Would you say yes?
Yes, I agree.
If they wanted to?
Yes. And my colleagues all agree as well.
Okay. And now, when talking about North Korea, we know absolutely, and everybody does also agree that they have at least 20 to 40 nuclear bombs. And that they have the case, say more than that or less?
Oh, more. Even the intelligence. Another thing that happened up until in the spring of 2017, and this again shows you how, this is another example of North Korea, how far off they were. The estimated range for North Korean nuclear weapons ranged from 6 to 20, okay? But after at the end of the summer, when they demonstrated that they had the H-bomb, all right, they said, wow, even the intelligence community admitted. They didn't admit it publicly, okay, but you could tell that they knew they were really wrong because they changed their estimate pretty dramatically. And, in the spring, it was 6 to 20 nuclear weapons. After the summer, a few months later, after the H-bomb was tested, the estimate went from 20 to 60, nuclear weapons, what had been the uppermost estimate became the lowest level of the estimate, 20. And now it was, and their estimate about the top was 3 times as many as that, up to 60. But I think they could have more than that. My own estimate, I've written an article about this that goes through the math. I think they could have over 100 nuclear weapons.
Over 100.
Yeah, about 120. It sounds pretty good.
120?
Yeah, that's an estimate that I would use. First of all, if you can build a hydrogen bomb, as they have, and you can build a super EMP weapon, and let's not forget that they've got help from the Russians on this. They're not doing this all on their own. The Russians and Chinese are helping them. So that means they've really got top quality engineers, working on the nuclear weapon designs. And the assessments that are based on 20 to 60, are assuming that their designs are less efficient, that they need like 5 kilograms of enriched uranium or plutonium to make a bomb. But if you're a good designer, you can actually make a bomb with 1 kilogram of enriched plutonium or uranium. So that greatly increases the number of bombs that you could make. And then I look at their forces that they've got deployed. Nobody ever does this, by the way. I don't know why they don't do it, but it's called looking at the order of battle. There's basically 2 ways of making an estimate. One of them is to take a look at the known nuclear reactors they have. And we don't know how much plutonium or uranium North Korea makes. We only know how much the Yongbyon nuclear reactor makes. That's the one we can see, okay? But we know they've got clandestine facilities, and we don't know how many they have, So that's a big question mark there. But that's one way, and that's the way the intelligence community makes the estimates. They're guesstimating about how much plutonium and uranium they can make. But there's another way of doing it, an additional sanity check when you do your estimate, which is what I use, and you look at the order of battle. Well, how many missiles have they actually deployed that could deliver a nuclear weapon? And for example, we know that they had, back in 2017, we know that they had 60 Musadan intermediate range ballistic missiles. All right, 60 of them. The Musadan is absolutely useless carrying anything but a nuclear weapon, because it's not accurate enough to deliver a conventional warhead or a chemical or a biological warhead. The Musadan makes no sense, unless you've got a nuclear weapon on it. So right off the bat, you've got 60 intermediate range ballistic missiles, that really are only justifiable if they're nuclear armed. Okay. Then in 2017, we know that they had, they had about a dozen ICBMs at that point. Okay. So that gets you up to something like 72, and then if you look at, they had I can't remember how many bombers there were, but there was a bomber fleet that was supposed to be dedicated to nuclear strikes. I don't know, let's call it a dozen aircraft, something like that. Those are probably, all nuclear armed. And then you've got the no-dongs and the scuds, which are theater missiles. Okay, they would be used for fighting tactical strikes in the theater. And most strategists, when they think through this, because we don't know what's going to be more important, making intercontinental strikes in intermediate range strikes, with ICBMs and IRBMs, or is the nuclear war going to be fought closer to home in the theater? And you'd say, well, I don't know. So I'd better try to be ready for about both possibilities. So you've got 60 Musadans and 12 ICBMs. So let's be conservative and say that they've got 60 tactical and theater nuclear weapons as well. All right. And that would provide you with a balanced force, because we know that they've got some nuclear weapons on those no-domes. And they would have them on the Scuds as well, which is a battlefield weapon. Okay. So, we know, if you assume that they've got competent weapon designers, equivalent to what the Chinese, Russians can do, maybe not quite as good, but close, then we know that they could make more than 100 nuclear weapons, because they don't need 5 kilograms, they can use 1 kilogram. So really, you could make a case for 5 times as many nuclear weapons as the intelligence community estimated. But then if you also use the order of battle and you look at the delivery systems, it just doesn't make sense to do things like make ICBMs that have no nuclear weapons on them, okay? Or intermediate range ballistic missiles that have no nuclear weapons on them. Those things clearly are designed for nuclear weapons. And then it makes no sense from a strategic point of view to have no theater and tactical nuclear weapons. And we know for a fact that at least the NODOM, was designed to carry nuclear. Now they have hundreds of NODOMs, but I don't think all of them would be nuclear armed. I don't think they can do that. But I think it's a fair, rational, conservative estimate to say that North Korea's got over 100 nuclear weapons at this point.
100 nuclear weapons.
120, okay. Neighborhood of 120 sounds looks good to me when you consider all these factors that I've been talking about.
Okay, one of the things in the news when it comes to North Korea, and I know when President Trump was the president, they kept saying, "Well, those nuclear, they don't have the capability to get them even make it to the United States. It wouldn't even come close, reach that level." Would you say that's not true, that they are able to reach continental U.S.? Can the North Koreans from North Korea fire a nuclear weapon at least to California? Would they be able to do such a thing?
I think you misspoke there. President Trump wasn't saying that. President Obama was saying that.
Oh, President Trump. Obama. Correct. Thank you.
Under President Trump, he definitely was aware. And even the idiot intelligence community, by the fall of 2017, was aware that they could strike America. That's why they revised their estimates so dramatically, because they had demonstrated the ability in the summer of 2017 to hit any city in the United States. And they demonstrated a hydrogen bomb. And Kim Jong-un even posed with the hydrogen bomb and its reentry vehicle, showing that they had it, and it could fit on a missile. That's why even the intelligence community today, bad as it is, acknowledges that North Korea can hit any city in the United States with a combination of atomic weapons and hydrogen bombs, thermonuclear weapons.
Wow.
So nobody disputes that now. But up until the spring of 2017, during the Trump administration, they were saying a very different story. They were basically continuing the Obama administration line. In 2013, President Obama, in fact, the day was April 16th, 2013. And I think you can look it up in the New York Times, because on that's the date he gave an interview with the New York Times where he asserted, and this is the first time I ever heard this argument, okay? Because we were in the middle, up until that point, it was the most serious nuclear crisis we ever had with North Korea. This was in the aftermath of the third illegal nuclear test, which happened in February of 2013. And we had in an escalating crisis, with North Korea all through that period, where Kim Jong-un was threatening us and saying, "Now I can strike you. Now I can destroy the United States. I can turn you into ashes." And Obama was trying to reassure the American people, "No, they're not there yet. We know they've got the bomb. We do know they've got long-range missiles. But," and this was a brand new argument, never used before, "but they haven't demonstrated a reentry vehicle yet." Okay, that's what he said on April 16th, 2013. And then
I think that's what I was talking about. Yes.
On the very day he said that, the North Korean KMS-3 passed right over his head. Orbited right over his head, passed over the Washington, D.C., New York City corridor, and they orbited a satellite. That was the first satellite that they started orbiting over us. That potentially, if it's nuclear armed, could do an EMP attack. And even if it isn't, it's demonstrated the ability to deliver a nuclear-armed EMP satellite on that trajectory. And even Obama's own, not everybody in the government is an idiot, okay? There are some heroes that are willing to speak up. People in the Department of Homeland Security, put together a briefing and a report and analysis, that tried to warn the president about that satellite and said, North Korea actually could do an EMP attack against us right now, even though they haven't demonstrated a reentry vehicle
right.
in 2013. And that briefing was suppressed. Wow. The White House didn't want the American people to know the truth.
Wow. Now, a question for you. Regarding this North Korean satellite, is there any way, and I don't know why they just don't do it, is there any way that the United States could just disconnect it, do something, make it inactive? Isn't there anything that we can do?
The EMP Commission recommended to President Trump that we shoot both of those satellites down.
Shoot them down. Yeah,
because the risk that they're nuclear armed is just too great. We don't know if they are, and we don't know if they aren't. But we can't afford, to have a surprise EMP attack happen over the United States. It's a far bigger existential threat than climate change, and we can do it in a safe way. The plan would be to send an Aegis guided missile cruiser, out to the Pacific and intercept the satellite after it's already passed over the United States and is way out there in the broad ocean areas of the Pacific. So it's far enough away from shipping lanes and air traffic lanes and from inhabited islands, so it would do the least possible damage to humanity in case the thing is rigged for salvage fusing.
Yes.
You can rig up something like that, a warhead, so that if it's intercepted, it'll detect the interception and then blow itself up wherever it happens to be. And so you could, when you do the interception, inadvertently trigger an EMP. Okay, so just in case that happens, you wouldn't want to intercept the thing over North America.
No.
But we could intercept it out over the broad ocean areas. And we've done that with satellites in the past. We've used an Aegis guided missile cruiser to take down a satellite that had a nuclear reactor on it, a small nuclear reactor, and it was in a decaying orbit, and we take it out. So we have the capability to do that. And I wish the president had done it, but obviously the State Department probably talked him out of it, or weighed in and said, "Oh, don't do that. That's an act of war," And that's if we're not even willing to do that, I mean, what are we willing to do? The satellites are illegal. They're a clear and present danger to us. They're not on North Korean territory. If we're not willing to shoot down a satellite in orbit, that's not even a legal satellite, what are we going? I was recommending that we even make a limited strike, not a nuclear strike, but a conventional strike to disarm North Korea. And this was an article I wrote, in the fall, right after that H-bomb test. I wrote an article that actually went to the White House, and some people read it and were taking it seriously. Some pretty serious people. I was pleased to see, because I was serious. That we should make a limited conventional surgical strike, take out the 12 ICBMs, take out the Musadams, take out the bombers, and take out the Gulf-class ballistic missile submarines. They've got 12 Gulf-class ballistic missile submarines. They don't have missiles on them yet, but at some point in the future, they could quickly get themselves a fleet of 12 ballistic missile submarines by arming those things. And they're all in mothballed, so it would be easy to take them all out. Now, we wouldn't be able to get everything, okay? But all of that could probably be done in a few hours before North Korea could even react, and then it would be over and done. And Kim Jong-un would know that it's a surgical strike, that we're not trying for regime change, we're not trying to kill him, all right? He's still going to have his vast army. He's still going to even have nuclear weapons that can threaten Japan and South Korea. Okay, but I think it was crossing the line, and it's been a huge mistake for the United States to let North Korea develop the ability to reach out and hit us. You know, that should have been intolerable. You know, and we should have preempted that. Maybe we still could do it, but it's not going to happen under this administration.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think it's going to happen now. But we postponed it
because he had, for a long time, he had 3 aircraft carriers in the vicinity, and that's the number you need. I had that number in my article, that you could probably do the whole thing in a few hours with 3 aircraft carriers. But you know, it didn't happen, and instead we had a very serious nuclear crisis with North Korea. You know, in the fall of 2017, that was exposed, and I guess it's that Woodward book. Can't remember.
Right.
You know, he interviewed Mad Dog Mattis, General Mattis, who's the secretary. Right. And Mattis had special communications equipment both in his bedroom and in a car that was following him around everywhere, so that just in case the North Koreans struck us, you know, we would be able to retaliate very quickly. You know, that's how serious it was. I mean, what does it take, you know, to provoke political military leaders to take advantage of our vastly superior military strength, you know, to preempt North Korea, so at least they can't threaten the American people. You know, if the Japanese and the South Koreans are so afraid of North Korea that they are willing to live with mutual assured destruction with Kim Jong-un, well, then let them. You know, that's why I wouldn't have extended it. It would have taken too long to go after the no-dons. There are too many no-don missiles, you know, to take out, to protect the South Koreans and the Japanese. But at least at that time, in 2017, they didn't have that many missiles that could reach the United States or our territories. Just 12, about 12 that could reach the United States. And there's 60 Musadams that could reach out and threaten our allies and U.S. territories with the Pacific. And so that was you know, we could have done that. And maybe we still could do it, but I don't know. That the North Koreans...
Not at this time, probably not.
They've been cranking out, you know, missiles like ICBMs like sausages at this point. And at some point, you know, they get to be too numerous. And the submarine, you know, they've already got one Simpo class submarine deployed. You know that you know, you have to locate. Gets harder and harder to coordinate a strike. You've got to find that submarine and be able to sink the submarine too. You know, while you're you know. And anyway, so the window of opportunity may have passed, and that could be our epitaph. You know, because
so what you're saying is, at this moment, it's up there, and the North Koreans, if they want to, they could use it. And if there's nothing we can do to prevent it after they use it. Correct?
We can harden. We can harden our critical infrastructures to survive. You know, to make the attack irrelevant. You know, by protecting ourselves against it. And that's what we should be doing. And we don't know for sure that those 2 satellites are armed. You know, they might be, and it would be like Kim Jong-un to do it. And even if they aren't armed, though, they demonstrate the ability, you know, to make an EMP attack, you know, by. But we just don't know. And if you're a conservative military planner, you want to err in the direction of safety, you know, and take out these things rather than trust the lives of 330 million people to Kim Jong-un. You know, it would be a pathetic excuse later on. You have to tell the few survivors, well, we didn't know if it was nuclear armed, and we were hoping it wasn't. You know, what a thing to say. I mean, the people pay, you know, the taxpayers pay to be protected, you know, and it seems to me it's the least we could do. It's not a provocative act. The satellites are illegal. You're taking it out over a broad ocean area. You know, it's not like North Koreans are actually seeing it, except on radar. You know, so it's no humiliation to Kim Jong-un. He wouldn't even have to tell people about it. So we're just eliminating, an existential threat to our own people, and we don't have a Pentagon that is willing to do that. They're so scared. But my esteem for them has gone down too. I mean, the military was one of the last institutions in the United States that the conservative people, had respect. Just like we were talking about the intelligence community before, right?
Correct.
You've seen the testimony of General Miley and the Joint Chiefs of Staff today approving critical race theory, brainwashing our troops in critical race theory and defending them. What a bunch of gutless cowards, this is the consequence of Obama getting away with firing, all the generals. He basically fired all the good generals, I think. And Bush Trump made the mistake. He should have gone back and hired all those guys. Instead, he stuck with the Obama generals. And that's what we've got now. These guys, they should be standing up for their troops. If you are the Secretary of Defense and you're the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, your reaction to claims that, our military has a problem with white supremacists and rapists, that's what they're saying. And all of our troops need to go to these critical race theory classes to be brainwashed into critical race theory, and have all the troops told, that we're a racist country, and that if you're white, you're an irredeemable racist, and there's no salvation for you. You can't even learn not to be a racist because it's so deeply embedded in you culturally, and in the structure of our civilization. What a crazy, treasonous, untrue thing. A Secretary of Defense, Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff should have threatened to resign. They should be threatening to resign. They should be defending our troops from this. They should be saying, no, Mr. President, our troops are not racist. We don't have a problem with racism in the United States military. They don't need, we're not going to subject our troops to the humiliation of critical race theory. This is going to be bad for morale, and it's not true. It's what the enemy would do to our troops if they could get their hands on them. The enemy would try to, the North Koreans would put our troops through something like this exactly, to try to turn our troops into traitors, to betray the United States. But our own government wants to do this to them. Any general worth his salt, any Secretary of the Defense worth his salt, should have resisted this strenuously and tendered his resignation rather than subject our troops to humiliation.
Yeah, I agree. Before we finish tonight, there's one thing, and I know you talked about in some of the articles you sent me: non-nuclear EMP weapons, and let's go through, if we can go, which countries have these, and are they active, and do you think that is something that they could use in the very near future? Non-nuclear EMP weapons.
Well, it's hard to say which countries have them, because it's a new cutting-edge military technology, and the development of them, most countries don't advertise it. They try to keep it secret. But the technology is accessible, even though it's so effective. It's accessible even to countries like Switzerland, which we do know, has programs. Australia. I'll bet most of the countries of the world have some kind of non-nuclear EMP weapons that they've developed. They just don't advertise them and talk about them that much. They're so accessible that even terrorists can make them or buy. I talk of in the article, for example, about this thing called the EMP suitcase, which is advertised in American Electronics magazine. It's not intended to be used as a weapon. Anybody can buy it. You don't need a license to use it. It's not intended to be used as a weapon. It's a diagnostic tool that has legitimate, peaceful purposes, like designing airports. When you want to locate a radar far enough away from a landing strip so that the radar doesn't fry the electronics in an airliner when it's going to land. You can use this EMP suitcase to figure things out like that, and use it peacefully. But it puts out 100,000 volts per meter over a short distance, over a couple of hundred yards. And if you had one of these things, you could put it in the trunk of your car. We've arrived at a place where, now a single individual, a disgruntled individual, a terrorist, a criminal, who had the money, could topple the technological pillars of civilization for a whole metropolitan area by blocking out, destroying a local EHV transformer. And if you had a team of terrorists running around the country, attacking EHV transformer substations with these things, you could put the whole nation into a protracted blackout, just as if a nuclear EMP attack had happened. I do a calculation in the report, that if you had an army of 20 trucks equipped with non-nuclear EMP weapons, manned by 40 personnel, so it's an army of 20 trucks and 40 guys, they could destroy almost 30% of the EHV transformer substations in the United States in 24 hours.
Whoa!
You only need that. I think the number was something like 500. Over 500 transformer substations could be attacked in 24 hours. You only have to take out 9 of those transformer substations. A protracted nationwide blackout. So they're a very serious threat. We know for sure North Korea's got them. North Korea's actually used them. That for a few years in a row, 2010, 2012, 2011, I think, they had this thing called the EMP cannon that they bought from the Russians. It's posed behind a truck. And they were using it to impose an electromagnetic blockade on Seoul, the capital of South Korea, by shooting at airliners with electromagnetic beams at airliners. The airliners were picking this up, and it was interfering with their navigation system. And so the airliners, of course, they didn't want to crash. When this thing was active, they were having to avoid landing in Seoul. And so the North Koreans were able to have a electromagnetic blockade of Seoul, just because they like to do things like that and make life hard for South Korea. And some of the other consequences were that it stopped, it interfered with radio transmissions. Cars along the border wouldn't start. Cars were knocked out on the South Korean side of the border. So we know the North Koreans have got these things too, and they have actually used them, for terrorist purposes.
So we can say that these non-nuclear, because you said in the article, you said an EMP cruise missile or a drone could inflict nationwide blackout.
Yeah, that's another way of doing it. Instead of having it in a truck, there's a technological revolution going on with these non-nuclear EMP generators. Because they're getting smaller and lighter and more compact and more powerful all at the same time. And they're small enough now so that you could put one on a drone or on a cruise missile and program the drone or cruise missile to follow the power lines. And so and it would knock out transformers and control systems. And just one missile that could have protracted flying capabilities, so it would fly a long time.
Just one.
One could do it. And I think that's what the Russian Skyfall is all about. That's that nuclear-powered cruise missile they've been experimenting with. It doesn't really make sense. The Russians claim it's going to carry a nuclear warhead, but it doesn't really make sense. They've got so many different missiles, cruise missiles, ballistic missiles, all kinds of different ways of delivering nuclear warheads against us. Why do they need a cruise missile that can fly for a protracted period of time, and all for days or even weeks, because it's nuclear powered? The other thing about being nuclear powered is that you can supercharge, the non-nuclear EMP warhead. You're not just using batteries; you're using a nuclear reactor. Imagine the juice you're going to get from that. It'll make a much more powerful electromagnetic field. So I think that's what they're really up to there. The Russian name for it is the Beresvetnik, which means storm petrel. They call it storm petrel. NATO calls it the Skyfall. And we've got, now we don't have something as good as what the Skyfall is probably going to be, but we've got CHAMP. We ourselves have deployed a system like that. And you can Google CHAMP. I think it's CHAMP attacks electronics or CHAMP attacks transformers. The manufacturer of CHAMP, there's a video where they had a demonstration of CHAMP going out and frying electric grids and electronic systems. Now, unlike a nuclear weapon, a single nuclear weapon, like one of those North Korean satellites, if it's got a nuke on it, can take out the electronics in all of North America at the speed of light, because of this huge field. These non-nuclear EMP weapons don't have a huge field like that. Their field is much more limited, maybe a kilometer, something along those lines. But you don't need the huge field to knock out the electric field, If you can follow the power lines, I did a calculation for the cruise missiles too. And, a cruise missile or a drone traveling at subsonic speeds, with a dwell time of, a few minutes over the target can attack like 1,000 of the HV or half the HV transformer substations in 24 hours. So they can do even better job if you did it that way. And that's a new way of warfare that isn't even on our radar screen yet, which is why I wrote the report. People are more concerned about the threat to our critical infrastructures because of the Colonial Pipeline Act and the fact that the meat industry was hacked. This is stuff as small potatoes. This is just the Russians showing us, giving a hint about what they could do.
Correct.
What they could do, they could win a whole war, by making much bigger and aggressive attacks against our electric grid that takes down these critical infrastructures across the whole country. But so that report, there's going to be a series of reports. Blackout warfare. This one was about non-nuclear EMP weapons.
Right.
Another one is going to be blackout warfare, cyber attack. Another one will be blackout warfare, nuclear EMP attack. Another one will be blackout warfare, physical sabotage of the grid using, rocket-propelled grenade launchers. The bad guys will use all of these things in combination.
Okay.
Because you can take out the grid with any one of them, but when you use them in combination, the synergistic effects are mutually reinforcing, and will defeat a system that is designed to be protected against just one of these threats, like cyber attack. I'm trying to educate the people in power in the Department of Homeland Security, the Department of Energy, that they've got to do more than protect against cyber attacks. They've got to protect against all of these threats.
Correct.
Doing that is protecting against the worst threat, which is the nuclear EMP threat. If you're protected against the worst threat, it'll mitigate all the others. That's what the commission recommended. That's what they should be doing, but that's not what they're doing. They're not even doing a good job protecting against cyber yet.
But before we finish tonight, and once again, thank you for being on the program. You shared so much. There's something I want to ask you, and I've asked you before. And I know that the Biden, they're about to sign infrastructure bill. I think he finally came to some sort of agreement tonight, this evening. This infrastructure, I don't know if it has anything included in what you've talked about. Do you think, are they thinking about dealing with this, or are they talking about building roads, fixing bridges, or are we dealing with this thing where, the EMP? Are we preparing ourselves, the grid? Are we investing money in that? What would you say? Well,
I'd say, there's two possible answers to this. Okay. I'm not aware of any specific line items. Still, it's early.
Right.
You would think that after these cyber attacks, that even the Biden administration would have a line item, at least for cyber,
Right.
But I'm not aware that there is. Of course, there might be, it's still early. They haven't actually gone through the mechanics of specifically drafting the bill and all the rest, and it could find its way in there. I do know that at one point they had allocated $100 million to modernizing the electric grid. That could include these protections. But my understanding that most of that was for green renewables like solar and wind power.
Oh,
What we're concerned about is climate change. Okay, and if they're stupid, okay, then they won't have done anything, all right? And I'm afraid that's probably the answer. But if they were prudent, and if they were like Ronald Reagan's administration,
right.
they would certainly, be putting money into this, and they might even and might even do it, clandestinely. There might be if I were a real optimist, I'd say, well, possibly there's a classified version of this.
Correct.
Because we don't want to tell our enemies exactly what we're doing, in terms
that's a possibility, right?
Possibility, but it's, I think, unlikely, given given that whenever I have to choose between are they being smart or are they being clever?
Exactly.
They usually come out being stupid on everything, but there is, I guess, hope.
We can only hope and pray that they do.
Right.
But what I'm sensing is that at the end, as we finished this evening, is there's a lot of procrastination. It seems like every administration, as you have been in several, I've spoken to several, for the last 10, 15, 20 years, it seems like what is that phrase? Kick the can down the road.
We have.
It's like we keep kicking it down the road. We don't want to deal with the problem, and then one day that's it.
Well, let me tell you why that is. And I wrote you may recall, and I think we may have talked about my open letter to Ann Neuberger, who is the White House cyber czar. Okay.
Right.
I think it's part of, first, for 20 years, we've been pursuing a grand strategy to protect our critical infrastructures that's doomed to fail. Republican and Democrat administrations alike have been following a grand strategy that envisions a public-private partnership, where the government and the private sector utilities are going to work together to protect the grid and and other critical infrastructures. And in that relationship, the government is the junior partner. And so the government basically says, I'm telling you guys, you need to protect your assets. Go and do it. I'm going to trust you to do it. And I'm assuming you're going to do it because you're good, patriotic citizens. And then they'll say, yeah, we're doing it. Don't worry. You don't have to regulate us or anything like that or fine us. Trust us. We're on top of this EMP and cyber stuff.
Right.
And we're doing it. And then we have something like the Texas ice storm happen, and we see they don't even do the real basics, like protecting against an ice storm. You can't protect against an ice storm. You're certainly not going to be able to protect against an EMP or a cyber attack. Or 2019, the winds in California, the high winds in California that caused all those forest fires because they were knocking down electric grid components.
Correct.
Forest fires that killed, hundreds of people. You're not smart enough to know that you can't have a power line tower that's 100 years old and you don't replace it. My God, so this is doomed to fail because the private sector doesn't see its job as national security. They don't have a national security culture. They have a business culture. They're about making as much money as they can and limiting the amount of regulation that the government has on them. They don't want to be bothered with any of that stuff. And when their feet are held to the fire, like over the Texas ice storm, then they'll cry, national security isn't our job. That's the job of the U.S. government. And they're right. This public, one of the few things the federal government is constitutionally required to do is provide for the common defense.
That's in the Constitution.
Yeah, right. For years they've been trying to offload this job onto somebody else's shoulders. And why is that? Well, that's because I think it's an example of civilizational decline. It used to be that the U.S. government could work miracles. There was the Great Generation that won World War II and the Great Depression, the Great Generation that had common sense, knew that if you wanted to build an atomic bomb in 2 years, you put Robert Oppenheimer and Edward Teller our most brilliant nuclear physicists in charge of that program. You don't put a lawyer in charge of that program, okay? So
Right.
you wanted to build a national highway system under the Eisenhower administration, that was more road mileage, or as much road mileage as the Roman Empire built in centuries. We built 50,000 road miles of interstate highways under the Eisenhower for national security reasons. You have the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers who deploy people who had won World War II. They're excellent engineers. You don't put a lawyer in charge of building the interstate highway system. If you wanted to make a nuclear navy, okay, nuclear submarines, nuclear aircraft carriers that had never existed before, you put Admiral Hyman Rickover, a brilliant engineer, a nuclear reactor expert in charge of the program. And if you want to send a man to the moon, you put Werner von Braun, one of the most brilliant rocket scientists in the world, in charge of that program. You don't put a lawyer in charge of that program. But today, when you look at who's in charge, of our cyber and EMP security, they're all lawyers, all of them. None of them have any deep technical expertise, and none of them want to admit that they don't know what they're doing. No bureaucrat, ever wants to admit that. And that's why for 20 years, they've been trying to shovel the responsibility over onto the private sector on the false assumption that the utilities know what they're doing. Oh, they're the experts on the electric grid, aren't they? After all, they run the electric grid. Yeah, they're experts on making money off the electric grid. They're not experts at protecting the electric grid from EMP or physical sabotage or cyber warfare. We've basically got, this is sort of like telling, let's suppose this is sort of like telling, so we're basically, asking our private sector entities to defeat a challenge from the elite cyber warriors of North Korea, China, and Russia. Their best and brightest going after our guys, while our best guys in Cyber Command, and in the Department of Defense aren't participating in that. I mean, this is a lot like expecting Kmart security guards, to be able to take on a challenge from the Russian Spetsnaz, the Chinese Special Forces.
It won't work.
Lose. Guess who's going to lose? And we've been losing for 20 years.
Correct.
Grand strategy changes, we're going to continue to lose. And maybe we'll even lose our country. At some point, we're going to stop playing around and actually do it. I think the only reason, though, one of the reasons they may be waiting, there may be two reasons why they haven't done it yet. First, we haven't hit rock bottom. For example, we're having a great debate right now over whether we unilaterally ban our intercontinental ballistic missiles. Just give them up, as a gesture, hoping Russia and China North Korea will follow a good example. If I was on the general staffs of those countries, I'd say, well, wait a minute. I don't want to go to yet. Let's see if the Americans actually give up their ICBMs yet. That's going to make the problem of defeating America so much easier, So we haven't hit the bottom yet. That's one thing. And the other thing is that freedom and democracy are in such trouble in this country. The only reason they would want to attack us, the chief reason they would want to attack us and take us out, is because of our free institutions, that we're free. And freedom is a threat to them, But we give up our freedom and we go down the path of becoming a one-party state, where diversity of opinion, freedom of thought is not permitted anymore. In other words, if we start modeling ourselves after China and Russia and North Korea, and we're on the way to doing that, we cease to be a threat in that respect. And you join the club of the tyrannies. And Sun Tzu, his adage number one, principle number one is the greatest victory is to win without war.
That's actually true. Dr. Pry, this evening has been fantastic. You have shared so many things we covered, from nuclear, non-nuclear, and I want to thank you once again to being here on Are You Ready? You've given a lot, and I hope everyone who's watched this program, please pay attention. I mean, I would say after hearing Dr. Pry, this is the third time, I recommend you be ready. I mean, have stuff at home. Don't wait to the last minute, because I just, these things are not being done as Dr. Pry stated. We're procrastinating and not being done right now. So I recommend all those who are watching, don't leave for tomorrow what you can do today. And Dr. Pry, any last words you would like to share?
Sure. Let me make this a suggestion.
Yes.
Too. Be a Minuteman. Be an American Eagle. Don't be a sheep. You can be the master of your fate. You might want to consider joining the EMP task force. We have many volunteers working on behalf of the security of America. At least visit our website, at www.emptaskforce.us, www.emptaskforce.us. And another thing you might want to consider is, one of my books, which would make you an instant expert on a lot of the threats we've been talking about.
Okay.
The Power and the Light. The Power and the Light. The Congressional EMP Commission's War to Save America. The Power and the Light. You can get that through Amazon.com. Don't even feel you have to read it yourself. Get the book, put a note, tape a note to the front of the book, and send it to your congressman, ordering him to read it. Order your senator to read it. Send it to the White House. Tell Joe Biden to read it. I would recommend that you read it too. But they're the ones who should be reading it. Get the government to do its job. Get the government to do its job. It might be possible because we're actually very close to getting the country protected. All the policies are in place. But the last ditch has to be carried, and that's occupied by these lawyers and incompetent bureaucrats who basically define the law. Under the law, they're supposed to be protecting the country, and they're defined in the EMP executive order, which still exists. Even the Biden administration supports President Trump's EMP executive order, but they've got to put resources behind it. And so maybe this, you can do your small part to help getting our nation.
Well, exactly. So I encourage you to be do your part. Call your congressman, call the senators, and pray. We need a lot of that too. But action also, do your part. Thank you, Dr. Pry. Once again, thank you for being on the program. Wish you the best and continue being able to talk to people. And for those who have watched Are You Ready? Please, if you see this program, if you never subscribe, please subscribe and share this video. It's very important information with as many people as possible. And I wish everybody have a very blessed evening. Thank you for being with us. Dr. Pry, once again, thank you for being on the program. We really appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
You have a very blessed evening, sir. Thank you, everybody. Have a blessed evening, and thank you for watching Are You Ready? Good night, everyone.